A young black man stands alone in a dormitory room. Around him, silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of isolation. For 4 years, almost no one will speak to him except to give him an order. This is West Point, 1873. And this man is about to make history. Alone. Act 1, The Boy from Georgia. Henry Ossian Flipper was born into slavery in Thomasville, Georgia, in 1856. He was 5 years old when the Civil War began and 9 when slavery ended, like millions of newly free black children. Flipper grew up in a world that had just changed completely and had no idea what to do with him. But Flipper was different. He was brilliant. He attended Atlanta University, one of the first schools created for black students in the South. His intelligence was undeniable. And in 1873, something extraordinary happened. Henry Flipper was nominated to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. At the time, only a handful of black cadets had ever been admitted to West Point. None had graduated. The Academy's culture was built entirely by and for white Southern and Northern elites, many of whom still held deeply racist views, even after the Civil War had ended slavery. Flipper knew exactly what he was walking into. He went anyway. Act 2, For Years of Silence. What Flipper experienced at West Point can only be described as a calculated campaign of isolation. White cadets were ordered, and in many cases, simply chose never to speak to him. Not in class, not at meals, not in hallways. For 4 years, Henry Flipper lived essentially alone, surrounded by hundreds of other young men. He ate alone. He studied alone. He walked the grounds alone. If he was lucky, an officer might speak to him, but only to give an order or correction. Imagine that. For years, not a single friend, not a single conversation that wasn't command. And yet, Flipper did not fail. He did not break. He studied. He marched. He followed every rule perfectly, knowing that any mistake, even a tiny one, could be used as an excuse to expel him. Other black cadets before him had been dismissed for infractions that white cadets committed constantly without consequence. Flipper understood. For him, there was no room for error. On June 14, 1877, Henry Ossian Flipper graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. He was the first African American to do so in the history of the institution. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, assigned to the 10th Cavalry Regiment, the Buffalo Soldiers. Act 3, An Officer on the Frontier. Lieutenant Flipper was sent to the American frontier, to Fort Sill and later Fort Davis, in the heart of Texas. As an officer in the 10th Cavalry, he commanded black enlisted men on some of the most dangerous patrols in the country, protecting settlers and infrastructure from raids and conflict. By every available account, Flipper was an outstanding officer. He was known for his engineering skills. He designed and built a drainage system at Fort Sill that solved the malaria-causing swamp problem so effectively that locals called it Flipper's Ditch for generations afterward. He was respected by the soldiers under his command. His record was, by the standards applied to any other officer, exemplary. But Flipper existed inside a system that had decided, long before he arrived, that a black man could not truly hold authority over white officers, even if those officers technically outranked him in nothing but skin color. Act 4, The Trial. In 1881, while stationed at Fort Davis, Flipper was placed in charge of the commissary funds, money used to pay for supplies. A discrepancy was found in the accounts. Flipper claimed the money had been stolen, possibly by someone trying to frame him, and that he had hidden the shortage temporarily while he tried to resolve it himself rather than immediately reporting it, a decision that, while a violation of protocol, was common practice among officers at the time. He was court-martialed, not for theft. The Army could never actually prove he had taken the money. He was acquitted of embezzlement, but he was convicted of a second charge, conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman, for the way he had handled the missing funds. The punishment was total: dismissal from the United States Army, dishonorable discharge. Historians who have studied the case closely note something striking. White officers accused of similar and often far more serious financial irregularities were frequently given lighter punishments, reprimands, or simply allowed to resign quietly. For Flipper, There would be no quiet resignation. There would be no second chance. His military career, the career he had endured 4 years of total isolation to earn, was over. He was 25 years old. Act 5, A Life After the Army. What Flipper did next reveals the kind of man he truly was. He did not disappear. He did not give up. He moved to the American Southwest and reinvented himself as a mining engineer and surveyor, fields where his West Point education in engineering proved invaluable. He became fluent in Spanish. He worked across Mexico and the southwestern United States for decades, eventually becoming a respected expert in land surveys and mining law. He even worked for the U.S. government again, as a translator and assistant to a U.S. Senate committee investigating Mexican land grants, and later for the Department of the Interior. For the rest of his life, 60 more years, Flipper tried repeatedly to clear his name. He wrote letters. He petitioned Congress. He never stopped insisting that the conviction had been unjust. Henry Ossian Flipper died in 1940 in Atlanta, Georgia, the city near where he had been born into slavery 84 years earlier. He died believing the United States Army would never acknowledge what had been done to him. Act 6, The Long Correction. In 1976, the U.S. Army posthumously changed Flipper's discharge to honorable 95 years after his court-martial. A bust of Flipper was unveiled at West Point. But the final act came in 1999. President Bill Clinton granted Henry Flipper a full pardon, the first West Point graduate in American history to receive a presidential pardon. Clinton's statement acknowledged what historians had long believed, that Flipper's prosecution had been driven by racism, not by his conduct. 59 years after his death, 118 years after his court-martial, America finally said what it should have said all along. Henry Flipper did nothing wrong.